Happy Reformation Day, everyone. I hope you've joined our Here We Stand series this month and are enjoying it and being edified by it. It's a remarkable gift to have the Bible in our own language so that we can read it for ourselves and to read the book of Job for ourselves, which we begin tomorrow in the Navigator's Bible reading plan. Here's a question about those early chapters in Job from Lisa, a listener to the podcast. Pastor John, hello, and thank you for APJ. We often focus on how Job responded to suffering, the steadfastness of Job, as James says in James 5:11. But we often don't focus on Job's wife's response in Job 2, verses 9 and 10. Can you expound on her response and tell us what lessons we can take about how not to respond to personal suffering?
Both in the Old and the New Testament, amazingly, God uses Satan to serve his own purifying, strengthening, preserving purposes in the lives of his precious children. In other words, God baffles Satan by making him the instrument of the very thing he hates, namely trust in God and holiness in life. And I mentioned this just to make sure that none of us thinks that Satan's involvement with Job's suffering is somehow exceptional in the Bible and can be marginalized as though it weren't going to happen to us. Remember how Paul describes his own thorn in the flesh and why it was given to him in 2 Corinthians 12:7, to me, to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations. A thorn was given to me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. Now, Satan's purpose in our lives is not to keep us from becoming conceited. His purpose is to make us conceited, make us proud and arrogant and self-sufficient. But this thorn was given to keep Paul humble, keep him trusting God. So it was sent from God, but the messenger that God used to send it was Satan. So if we see Satan's hand in our suffering, it doesn't mean that the suffering has no good design from our loving Father. So we're not surprised when we read in Job 1:11 that God makes Satan the instrument of the terrible suffering that he used to test his servant Job. Satan says to God, "Stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he'll curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand, only don't touch him." And Satan goes out and with God's permission takes all of his oxen, all of his camels, all of his donkeys, and then kills all 10 of his children. And Job's astonishing response that magnifies the worth and trustworthiness of God is this: "Naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away." He didn't say Satan has taken away. The Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He pays no attention to Satan whatsoever. For all we know, he doesn't even know what happened in the heavenlies with regard to Satan, but goes straight to the ultimate source of his pain and blesses God, trusts God, casts himself utterly on God. So Satan makes one more challenge against Job and against God and says, "Skin for skin. All that a man has, he'll give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh." And, when I read that, I couldn't help but think that Eve was, "This is now at last bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh." Could this also include his wife, his bone and his flesh? And he will curse you to your face. And God is willing to take this test one step further and takes Satan at his word and says, "Behold, he's in your hand. Only spare his life." So he goes out and under God's sovereignty, he strikes Job with terrible, terrible sores. Verse 7. So Satan struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, And then comes Job's encounter with his wife. That's chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. His wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." Now that's exactly what Satan wanted Job to say. I curse you, God, and I'm done with life. So Job's wife had lined up with Satan and becomes part of his temptation. Bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh, becoming part of what Satan wants him to do. So what's the author's purpose in telling us about Job's wife's apparent despair? I think it has a double purpose. One is to show that in our suffering, our most precious friend or loved one may turn against us. At least it may seem so. Our flesh and bone, part of our very self, may become part of Satan's test. The other purpose, I think, is that we not let tests embitter us, to show that Job didn't let the test embitter him, but rather bring out of us a response of hope to the very loved one who has become part of the satanic temptation, and that we bring clarity to that loved one about God. And I think that's what Job models here. He says, "You speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God and not receive evil?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. So he says two things. One, let's be clear about God. He has the right to bring comfort and calamity into our lives. He owes us nothing. We don't deserve anything from him. We can't negotiate with him. He has done us no wrong, wife. His ways are high. We will understand by and by, even if we don't now. And the other response is hope. Hope that his wife is not settled in her opposition, but only weakened for a moment. Now, I think that the author of this book wants us to see this. People don't always catch this, but I think the author tips us off in several ways. I see at least 4 pointers to the hopefulness of her situation that Job sees. First, up to this point in the story, even though all 10 of her children had died, there's no mention of her despair or bitterness when Job says the Lord took away. Second, at the end of the book, when Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar are rebuked, she's not among those who get rebuked. Third, when Job explains to her that God has a right to bring good and evil, comfort and calamity, there's no pushback. And most importantly, Job does not say, "You are a foolish woman." He says, "You speak as one of the foolish women." In other words, he's not yet willing to put her in that category. I don't see you yet, dear wife, as one of the foolish women, but as temporarily giving way under the horrible losses you have endured. So I think the reason Job's wife is introduced in this story is mainly not to condemn her, but to highlight again the triumph of Job's faith and hope and love. You may remember, Tony, and maybe a few of our listeners do, I doubt it, but maybe I wrote a cycle of 4 long poems about Job, and I tried in the second one to capture this hope, and it was all about the encounter with Job's wife. And I thought it might be good to end this APJ by crawling inside Job's head in an imaginary conversation with his wife to see how they might have resolved this together. So here we go, just a few lines from this poem. He pulled himself up from his place, and by some power of grace he stood beside his wife and said, "I would no doubt in your place feel the same. But, wife, I cannot curse the name that never treated me unfair. And just this day has answered prayer. What prayer? What did you bid him do? That I should bear this pain? Not you. Oh, Dinah, do not speak like those who cannot see because they close their eyes and say there is no God, or fault him when he plies the rod. It is no sin to say, my love, that bliss and pain come from above. And if we do not understand some dreadful stroke from his left hand, then we must wait and trust and see. Oh, Dinah, would you wait with me? I'll try, she said. I didn't mean that you should die. I'm more unclean than you with all your sores. She knelt and found between a boil and welt a place to put her kiss. Is there some evidence that God could care for such as me? Job touched her hair. You are another answered prayer.
Very compassionately put, Pastor John. Thank you for this perspective of temptations and love for a spouse at the same time. And if you want to find this and the other poems, Google search it. 4 Job Poems by John Piper. 4 Job Poems by John Piper. A Google search will get you into that 1994 series of poems on Job, all 4 in one series that you'll eventually find at desiringgod.org. And with that, we enter Job together this weekend, and that means we are entering the final weeks of our Bible reading plan in 2024. Let me know what you think. Did it encourage you to hang with the Bible reading this year as we made it a focus of our podcast? Perhaps this was your first time reading the whole Bible through in a year. Maybe you started and you dropped out. Whatever happened, I would love to know your experience and how we can better serve your commitment to reading the whole Bible in 2025. We may use this Bible reading plan again next year, but you tell me. Email me your thoughts at askpastorjohn@desiringgod.org and put Bible reading in the subject line. Well, there are dark stories of people who get taken advantage of in this world and who want revenge. That's the case next time when we hear from a listener to the podcast who has endured a lot of pain at the hands of her enemy. I'm Tony Reinke. We'll see you on Monday.